One day, I was returning home to the family I cherished, and the next, I found myself inside a courtroom, listening in disbelief as my wife of 10 years calmly recited a list of my alleged failures as both a husband and a father. Her words flowed with unsettling ease, smooth and sweet, like honey laced with poison. Ava had once seemed like everything I ever dreamed of, sharp-minded, driven, and endlessly captivating. Back then, I never would have imagined that the very traits I admired could be used against me so coldly. But there we were. The woman I had once trusted with my entire heart now stood before me, wielding that trust like a weapon. And the legal system? It handed it handed her full control over everything that mattered to me. There's a specific kind of finality that comes with the echo of a gavel slamming down. It doesn't just signal the end of a trial. It reminds you how completely powerless you've become. Ava was granted full custody of Sophia, as though I had been reduced to nothing more than a part-time guest in my own child's life. The court had rebranded me into a financial provider, expected to cover spousal and child support, alongside a relentless stream of legal expenses. I noticed a flicker of pity in the judge's gaze, but empathy doesn't cover living costs. I tried to lock eyes with Sophia, who was sitting quietly in the back of the room, tightly holding onto her favorite stuffed animal. Her expression was one of confusion mixed with fear, and honestly, who could blame her? She couldn't grasp why her father wouldn't be going home with her anymore. I wanted nothing more than to rush to her side to promise her that everything would turn out fine. But the presence of the bailiff near the exit reminded me those moments were no longer mine to claim. As Ava walked past me, she leaned in, her tone low and dripping with satisfaction, saying, "You should have known better, Stephen." I kept still, made no response, didn't even blink. She assumed my silence was a sign of defeat. What she didn't recognize was that within that quiet, something was shifting. That's the thing with people like Ava. They confuse silence with surrender. But my entire professional life had been about navigating crises and turning them into chances. And this moment, it was no exception. That day, I stepped out of the courtroom, stripped of everything but my name and a deep burning determination. Yes, I had lost that round. But the bigger fight? That was only just beginning. Ava might have thought she could break me, exploit the system, and walk away untouched. But she had severely miscalculated. As for Sophia, she wasn't a prize to be passed around by legal decisions or Ava's twisted maneuvering. She was my child, and I would find a way to bring her back into my life, no matter how long it took or how hard I had to fight. I won't lie, those first few weeks after the verdict were brutal. I spent countless nights poring over financials, trying to make sense of how I'd sustain two lives, my own and the one Ava now demanded I fund. The spousal support amount alone felt like an insult, as though I was being penalized for being betrayed. Ava hadn't just taken my daughter, she was intent on draining every last penny from me. But wallowing has never been in my nature. I adapt. So if the law required me to pay, I would, but on my terms. When the first payment was due on a Monday, I spent Sunday night at the bank withdrawing the precise amount, $4,350, in coins, quarters, nickels, and dimes, all carefully rolled and packaged. I couldn't help but imagine the look on Ava's face when those heavy bags were dropped at her doorstep. I actually chuckled when her attorney called the following day. "Mr. Price, are you seriously doing this?" he asked, sounding both irritated and confused. "I'm completely serious," I said flatly, without a hint of emotion. The court had outlined the amount, not the method. I followed the letter of the order. The lawyer grumbled and threatened to bring contempt charges, but I knew my rights. The payment was made on time and in full. If she wanted it in a more convenient form, that was her responsibility. After that, I started getting more inventive. One month, I sent her the full amount using prepaid gift cards. Another time, I paid entirely in $2 bills. My personal favorite was the custom check printed on a greeting card with a smiling photo of me and Sophia. Ava tore that one to shreds, but she still had to cash it. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about making a point. I wanted Ava to understand that I hadn't broken, that I wasn't about to let her win this psychological game. If she wanted to exhaust me financially, she was going to have to work hard for every dime. I imagined her slamming doors, venting to her lawyer and quietly fuming every time she realized there was nothing she could legally do to stop me. That was my way of reclaiming some control, proving that while the court may have sided with her, she didn't get to dictate who I was. One night, Sophia called. Her tiny voice was tentative as she said, "Daddy, Mommy was really mad today. She said you're being mean." I gave a light chuckle, though my chest ached. "Sometimes adults have disagreements, sweetheart," I told her gently, "but everything I'm doing is to make things fair." After we hung up, I stared at the ceiling for hours. Sophia deserved better than to be caught in the middle of this storm. But as for Ava, she had made her choices, and I was far from finished making her live with them. When the contempt of court notice arrived, it hit me hard, like being struck in the face with something heavy. I had always known my payment methods were towing the line, even if technically legal. But the day law enforcement showed up at my office with handcuffs in hand, I realized I had underestimated just how far Ava was willing to go to see me crushed. Jail isn't anything like what you see on television. The silence was unsettling, thick and unnatural, like the stillness right before a storm rolls in. My new home was a cramped cell, barely spacious enough to lie down in. Sharing it was a towering man named Joe, a brooding presence who lived by his own rules and rarely spoke. But making friends wasn't part of my plan. At the beginning, I was consumed by rage, not just towards Ava, but at the entire flawed system. I had done everything by the book, paid every bill, attended every court hearing, followed the law, and still here I was, behind bars as if I were a criminal. The anger churned inside me, threatening to drown me. Then, I remembered something my father once told me. Life only defeats you if you let it. So I refused to remain idle. I kept my head down and observed. Jail has its own rhythm, its own economy, and I'd always been good at understanding people. It wasn't long before I encountered Ryan, a blast from my past. Years ago in college, we'd co-founded a small tech venture before life pulled us in different directions. He ended up here after his financial decisions spiraled into disaster. Reuniting with him felt like grabbing hold of a lifeline in the middle of chaos. Ryan hadn't lost his edge. His clever mind was still very much intact. We spent countless nights whispering strategies, not just for getting by in jail, but for something far bigger: revenge. Ava hadn't destroyed me. She'd only driven me underground, where my thoughts could take root and grow strong. Together, Ryan and I started small, creating a web of information from the inside. He had a talent for sniffing out who owed favors, who had leverage. I fed him everything I knew about Ava, her routines, allies, and vulnerabilities. Slowly, a clear picture started forming. During the day, while Ryan and I worked in secret, I also made time to remember Sophia. Her infectious laugh, her endless questions about the world, the warmth of her presence during movie nights. She was my motivation, the reason I endured the isolation. Days turned into weeks, and eventually I adapted. I figured out how to survive, how to trade wisely, when to listen, and how to follow the unwritten rules. By the time I walked out a free man, I was no longer the person who had been dragged in. Stepping into the open air, the sun hit my skin differently. Ava might have won temporarily, but unknowingly, she had gifted me something crucial: uninterrupted time to reflect and strategize. And if there was one thing I excelled at, it was orchestrating a comeback. Her world was fragile, built like a house of cards, and I was coming to knock it down. There's a distinct flavor to freedom when you've been locked away. As I exited that place, I felt the warmth of the sun and drew in a breath of fresh air, but Ava's betrayal still lingered heavily in my chest. Justice no longer felt like enough. What I sought now was retribution, not reckless or impulsive, but slow, deliberate, and devastatingly effective. She had turned my life into a battlefield, and I had no intention of walking away without dismantling her empire in return. My first move was a phone call to Caleb, my brother. He was the kind of person who operated behind the scenes with ties reaching into places even I couldn't access. He didn't need explanations. All he said was, "Just tell me what to do." That was all it took to set the wheels in motion. Next, I reached out to Mason, my longtime business partner and one of the few people whose loyalty I could still count on. Mason had a gift for navigating bureaucracy. He could make records disappear or resurface with just a few connections. I told him plainly, "We're not just going after Ava, we're targeting everyone involved in this charade." Ava believed herself to be untouchable, but I knew better. Everyone has skeletons, and once unearthed, those secrets have the power to flip the script. Caleb began digging into her closest circle, the friends who had once mocked me, the attorneys who twisted facts, even the judge who seemed far too eager to rule in Ava's favor. Meanwhile, Mason delved into her financial life, analyzing her expenditures and tracing her affiliations. What emerged was a tangled mess of extravagance and poor judgment. Ava wasn't just unethical, she was careless. From extravagant vacations to suspicious transfers, her closet was packed with skeletons itching to come out. While they worked, I kept to the shadows, playing the part of the broken ex-husband. That illusion was easy to maintain. Ava had worked hard to ensure the world viewed me that way. But I knew how to bide my time. Each new revelation from Caleb and Mason was another arrow added to my arsenal. Sophia, without realizing it, became a quiet informant. During our visits, she spoke innocently about Ava's parties, her new friends, and the frequent strangers passing through their home. To an outsider, her words seemed harmless, but to me, they were crucial pieces falling into place. I didn't want to involve Sophia, but she deserved the truth one day. For now, I kept my attention sharp. Ava had created a throne out of deception, manipulation, and greed. The time had come to witness it all unravel. In the middle of the turmoil, Sophia's eyes remained the only steady point. Every time I looked at her, I clung to those wide, brown eyes filled with wonder. They hadn't lost their shine yet, though I sensed the edges starting to crack. Her smile no longer reached her eyes, and watching her pretend that everything was fine, like she couldn't feel her world stretching at the seams, was quietly heartbreaking. Her curiosity began surfacing in small, innocent questions. At first, they were gentle. Why don't you and Mom talk anymore? Why aren't you at my school performances? Questions like those were impossible to answer truthfully without painting Ava in a bad light, something I wasn't ready to do. But as time went on, those questions became more pointed, shifting into remarks that stung like tiny cuts. She'd say things like, Mom's always with her friends lately, or Uncle Peter seems to sleep over a lot now. Sophia never directly said what was bothering her, but the discomfort was clear in her voice. Ava had become so absorbed in her new lifestyle that she seemed blind to the one person who should have remained her priority, our daughter. Then, one day, out of the blue, Sophia called. It wasn't our usual call time, and her tone was quiet, uncertain. Daddy, she said softly, I want to come home. My breath caught for a moment. What do you mean, sweetheart? I asked gently. I don't like being here, she murmured. Mom's always preoccupied, and she never really hears me. I don't enjoy her friends, and I miss you. I sank into the nearest chair, gripping the phone like it might vanish. I told her carefully, Sophia, you know I'd welcome you back instantly, but the court... I don't care about that, she interrupted, her voice rising. I just want to be with you. It took everything in me to keep my emotions in check. I reassured her we'd find a way, that my door, my heart, would always be open to her. That was the moment I realized the tide was turning. Sophia wasn't just my child, she was perceptive, just like me. She began distancing herself from Ava. Less time at home, more hours spent with her friends or grandparents, anyone who wasn't part of Ava's shimmering, disconnected reality. When she turned 16, she'd had enough. With determination far beyond her years, Sophia filed for emancipation. The judge granted her request, despite Ava's fierce objections. I'll never forget Ava's expression as Sophia packed her belongings and returned to the house we once shared as a family. It didn't feel like triumph, at least not yet, but it was the beginning of something real. Having her home again felt like I could finally breathe. Sophia wasn't just my daughter, she was my anchor, grounding me and reminding me what this fight had always been about. Together, we started to rebuild. She found her confidence again. I regained some stability, and most importantly, our connection deepened. Ava had tried to take everything from me, but she overlooked one undeniable truth. Nothing is stronger than the bond of family. Soon, subtle murmurs began to ripple through the carefully curated image Ava had crafted. Small cracks in her perfect life became visible, missed deadlines, careless mistakes, and signs that she was slowly losing control. It started quietly, but just like a dam buckling under relentless pressure, her facade began to shatter piece by piece. The first significant hit landed at her workplace. I had stayed silent in the early phases, letting my team collect evidence quietly. Mason had exceeded all expectations: emails, dubious financial activities, and misuse of company resources. It was more than enough to raise red flags at her firm. Though I wasn't present at the meeting, I pictured the scene vividly. Ava walking in with her usual confidence, unaware of the mountain of evidence waiting to crush her composure. When she left that boardroom, her career was over, and her image thoroughly dismantled. But the fall didn't stop there. Thanks to Caleb's extensive network, Ava's private life soon became a topic of public discussion. Pictures from lavish vacations paid with borrowed funds, her questionable relationships, and most damaging of all, clear proof of how she twisted the legal system to frame me, were exposed. The public doesn't offer mercy, and Ava felt the sting of that truth. Those once loyal friends who surrounded her when things were shiny and new quickly distanced themselves. Invitations ceased. Social circles moved on without her. Even the parents from Sophia's former school steered clear, casting glances and whispers her way whenever she appeared. It would be dishonest to claim I pitied her. Ava had built her world on deceit, control, and self-interest, and the collapse she faced was simply the result of those choices. By the time the bank reclaimed her luxurious home, the one she fought so hard to hold on to after the divorce, the entire ordeal felt almost predictable. Her desire to live extravagantly while draining me of everything had finally caught up with her. Sophia, to her credit, didn't gloat. She could have easily thrown everything back at Ava, used her downfall as ammunition, but instead, she chose restraint. Her quiet grace in the face of betrayal filled me with a deeper pride than I ever expected. "She's still my mother," she once said with a voice that was calm yet resolute. But she made her decisions, and those choices left her with nothing in the end. When the storm finally settled, Ava found herself in a modest apartment far from the city center, relying on the remnants of her dwindling savings. Her name, once uttered with admiration and associated with success, became a quiet warning, a tale of downfall shared in hushed tones at professional mixers and upscale gatherings. I hadn't needed to raise a hand. She was the architect of her own collapse. Sometimes, retribution doesn't explode in dramatic scenes or grand endings. Sometimes it's simply observing everything fall into place just as you planned. Ava had taken her risks and played her part in the game, but in the end, she was reduced to a piece removed from the board, insignificant and forgotten. When the court reopened my case, I stepped into that courtroom as a different man. The person who once stood there, weary, lost, defeated, was gone. I had served my sentence, reflected on my past, and prepared myself with undeniable facts. This time, I walked in ready to reclaim the truth. The judge who had previously overseen my case, the same one Ava had apparently influenced, was no longer serving. Accusations of biased rulings and inappropriate behavior had finally caught up to him, leading to his quiet removal. It was a fitting kind of justice. In his place stood a new judge, focused, sharp, and immune to theatrics. For the first time, I felt like I had a real shot. My lawyer, fortified by the irrefutable evidence Mason and Caleb had unearthed, presented a solid case. The documents told the entire story: Ava's deceit, her mishandling of finances, and the forged records that cast me as an unworthy partner and parent. As each point was revealed, I glanced at Ava. Her complexion turned pale, her poise slipping with every detail brought to light. But this wasn't just about exposing her lies. I needed redemption. I wanted the court and Sophia to finally see the person I truly was, not the villain Ava had fabricated. When the verdict was delivered, it felt as if invisible chains had finally fallen away. My financial burdens were greatly reduced, and the requirement for spousal support was eliminated entirely. Though the court didn't pursue punitive action, they did formally acknowledge the damage caused by Ava's manipulation. Most importantly, the matter of custody was reconsidered. Sophia had already chosen to live with me, but now the court gave that decision its official blessing. Ava's objections were dismissed without hesitation. The same system she had once weaponized was now standing firmly against her. As I exited the courtroom, my eyes briefly met Ava's. After all these years, she seemed diminished, fragile, and powerless. I didn't revel in her defeat. There was no need. The decision had been made, and this time, justice had spoken truthfully. The days that followed were almost dreamlike. People who had kept their distance during the chaos started reconnecting. Old friends, coworkers, even casual acquaintances, offering kind words, apologies, and congratulations. Strangers who had followed the public twists of my story sent messages of encouragement. Still, none of that matched what I gained at home. Sitting at the dinner table with Sophia, hearing her laugh again, watching her smile without that shadow of worry, that was the real victory. The turbulence had finally passed, and for the first time in a long while, life felt full of promise. Ava may have started this battle, but I was the one who ended it. Now, it was time to begin anew. Rebuilding your world after it's been dismantled piece by piece is no easy feat. But starting over comes with a certain freedom. I could finally exhale without the constant pressure of Ava's plots bearing down on me. I was no longer just surviving, I was living, truly living, for myself and for Sophia. Having Sophia home changed everything. The silence that used to haunt the house during meals was now replaced with laughter and stories about her school day, her friends, and dreams for what lay ahead. She was finding herself again, and in that process, she inspired me to do the same. That's when Olivia became a part of our lives. We had known each other since childhood. Back then, she was the girl with the infectious laugh who always ran barefoot across the schoolyard fields. Life took us in different directions, and we lost touch, but fate had its own plans. When Sophia began seeing Olivia for therapy during the most intense stretch of the custody conflict, our paths unexpectedly crossed again. At first, our conversations were short. Polite greetings, quick updates about Sophia, routine exchanges during drop-offs and pickups. But there was something comforting in Olivia's tone, something steady in her eyes. She didn't view me through the lens of Ava's distorted narrative. She saw me, the real me. Gradually, Olivia became more than just Sophia's counselor. She became a trusted presence in both our lives. She guided Sophia through her emotional recovery, and in doing so, gently reminded me that it was okay to let someone new into my world. Little by little, we began to spend more time together. What began as simple coffee meetups slowly evolved into shared dinners. Those dinners led to long walks, and the walks naturally transformed into deep conversations that often lasted well into the early hours of the morning. Olivia never pressured me, and I didn't rush into anything. After everything I had endured, trust didn't come easily. Yet somehow, Olivia had this calming presence that made the chaos in my mind feel less overwhelming, more bearable. One evening, as we relaxed on the porch, admiring the soft colors of the sunset, Sophia stepped outside. A playful smirk tugged at her lips. With her arms confidently folded across her chest, she asked, "So, are you two like a couple now, or what?" Only a teenager could deliver such a question with that much boldness. Olivia and I locked eyes and couldn't help but laugh. "You're getting a little too curious for your own good," I told her, shaking my head. But our expressions had already given her the answer. In no time, Olivia became an integral part of our daily lives. She wasn't trying to take anyone's place. She simply offered her quiet strength and constant support whenever we needed it. With her help, we began to build a new life, something healthier, something real. Though the emotional scars didn't vanish, they stopped being the thing that defined who we were. The house, once echoing with remnants of a shattered past, gradually transformed into a true home again, a space filled with comfort, joy, and renewed optimism. Ava's memory still lingered, but its grip no longer held the same power. She had moved on, marrying a wealthy attorney, naturally. From what I gathered, her new life was polished on the outside but hollow within. It was clear she was trying to maintain a picture-perfect image, though the cracks beneath the surface were hard to miss. I didn't carry any ill will toward her. We had each made our choices, and as I sat on that porch, Olivia sitting beside me and Sophia already dreaming up her next journey, I felt sure of one thing: my life was no longer marked by the pain Ava had caused. It was shaped by the love that had emerged in its aftermath. If there's one lesson life has made abundantly clear, it's this: the truth eventually finds its way out, no matter how deeply it's buried. Seeing Ava's carefully constructed world unravel wasn't just gratifying, it brought clarity. She had built everything on deception, manipulation, and greed. And now, each of those decisions was catching up with her. But she wasn't the only one feeling the consequences. The chain reaction of her downfall reached far beyond her. The judge, who had once ruled unfairly against me, found himself disbarred after investigators discovered a troubling pattern of misconduct. Ava hadn't been his only questionable decision, and now the very legal community that had once dismissed my concerns scrambled to disassociate from the damage he left behind. Ava's lawyer, the one who had practically turned twisting the truth into a career, faced his own reckoning. Thanks to the evidence Mason and Caleb had brought forward, I didn't need to act. His lies spoke for themselves. He lost everything: his license, his reputation, and eventually his entire firm. Even Ava's so-called friends didn't escape unscathed. Many who had gained from her dubious dealings, whether through under-the-table agreements or preferential treatment, were exposed. Their names, once respected in social and business circles, quickly fell into disrepute. People distanced themselves, not wanting to be associated with the mess. At this point, it wasn't about revenge, not entirely. It was about restoring balance. It was about making it clear that actions come with consequences. For years, Ava and her inner circle had manipulated the rules to benefit themselves, but now, finally, those same rules were turning back on them. The collapse wasn't loud or theatrical. It unfolded quietly and with precision. Careers came to an end. Friendships withered away. Lives shifted, not because of anything I did directly, but due to the weight of their own choices catching up with them. I deliberately stayed away from the spotlight. This wasn't about proving anything to the world or seeking applause. It was about taking my life back and ensuring Sophia had a better future, and seeing justice naturally take its course. That alone was enough for me.